Last day of the month on a non-leap year, February 28th. Friend of the show, Nolan King, sending out the tweet that Renato Moicano is in consideration to replace Rafael Fiziev, taking on Rafael dos Anjos, and then you get the let's go retweet with the comment from the man himself, Moicano. And then obviously today, March 1st, we finally get the confirmation. So it seems that the deal is verbally agreed upon by both parties. Moicano going to be stepping in, replacing Rafael Fiziev, taking on Rafael dos Anjos at 160 pounds, a 5-round fight. Coming up in your co-main event, UFC 272. Glad that everybody could join us for this re-prediction that is the fight between Dos Anjos and Moicano. And for both of these guys, an interesting road to get here, to say the least. I mean, for Dos Anjos, your former champion at 155, he took on some Goliaths at 170 pounds. And he's moved back down to 155. Now, his last time out, it was a short notice replacement type of affair. It was a 5-rounder. He took on Paul Felder. Chris Lee scored the contest, 48-47. Felder, he was asleep at the wheel because the other two judges had it 50-45 for Dos Anjos. But ultimately, grinded him out, used his wrestling, little bit of pop-pop striking, and he's able to get the win there. Now, he's supposed to be taking on Fiziev, a totally different opponent than Moicano, because the story for Moicano, just overall in his career, took on some Goliaths at 145. He came out on the losing end of some of those fights, moves up to 55, a little bit of an odd road, and we can take you through it, but you look at it. Beats Hodzovic, loses to Fiziev, it's going to happen. Beats Jai Herbert, beats Alexander Hernandez, will back up. That was about 2 weeks ago when he fights Hernandez. That, a 3-rounder on the main card. It was UFC 271. And in that fight, we'll talk about it quite a bit, but I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to talk about Moicano, then we're going to come back to Dos Anjos. In that fight, at about minute 30, Moicano coasted through that first round.
Minute 30?
From 130 at the end of the round. So there was a minute and 30 seconds left in that round.
I'm going to throw a bit of a curveball to that, though. Did Renato Moicano not look exhausted at the end of the first round in his last fight? Like, that's what I'm concerned.
That's what I'm saying.
Well, no, that's what I'm concerned about. Well, no, coasting would imply that he was doing it on purpose to not throw volume to get tired. He was just spent. Like, he was exhausted. And he was able to recover quite a bit in that minute in between round 1 and 2. But he did look like the most tired man alive, a.k.a. Dada 5000 at Bellator that one time. I was concerned for Moicano in a fight against Alexander Hernandez that was only supposed to go 15 minutes. Now he's scheduled for a 25-minute fight on, what, 5 days' notice? It is from Saturday. And here's the other little wrinkle that we haven't mentioned yet. Moicano's on a plane right now to the US, and he weighs 180 pounds. Now, that was reported by Ariel Helwani. I don't know if that's going to be a big weight cut for him. I don't know if it's going to be a minor weight cut for him. But I know 20 pounds is a fairly big deal for most fighters at the lightweight or around the lightweight region. So it'll be very, very interesting to me what version of Moicano we get, especially cardio-wise. Because let's say he made lightweight and everything was perfect the last time around. We still have some question marks about how he was going to look late in that fight. Now it's on short notice. He's not in a training camp. He's not really in fight shape. Let's be honest. If you fight at lightweight, you're probably not ballooning up to 180 all the time. And now you're expecting him to go 25 minutes against RDA. It's just, this is very reminiscent to me of the Bobby Green Islam Makhachev fight from last weekend, where it's like, hey, we have this great opportunity for you. Do you want to accept it before we give you the name? And Moicano's like, I mean, I guess. And next thing you know, he finds himself flying to America to fight Rafael dos Anjos. It's just, like, this is one of those classic, if he had a full training camp, this would be fight of the night. Like, screw whatever other fights we had on there at the start of the week. This fight would be in contention for that. It's just unfortunate that there's so many hurdles Moicano has to jump to just to get to fight week.
And I mean, getting ready for this and getting ready for the video, I did more of a deep dive on Moicano than I did for Dos Anjos, because if you look at it for RDA, he's a southpaw. He likes to wrestle, and he uses striking to get into his grappling. And I mean, if you go back, you look at Dos Anjos' last submission win, it takes us back a little bit. I mean, you look at the 5-on-in, he does have the Kevin Lee arm triangle. It's in the 4th round of their fight. But if you want to take a guy in Dos Anjos, take on a big opponent, submitting him, look at the Neil Magny fight. How does he get into that submission? It's quick. It happens in the first round. Leg kick, Magny slips, falls, and then Dos Anjos spends most of the first round just in a bit of a half guard, elbowing, softening him up, and then all of a sudden, Magny tries to get back up to his feet. Whoop! We're going to try and get into that arm triangle choke. He gets it. Magny taps. Didn't go out on a shield. He tapped in that one. A great win nonetheless. But you look at Dos Anjos, and you look at the amount of 3-round fights that he's had since 2017. Saffiedine on a main card. You've got Magny. That one is a 3-rounder. And the fight against Michael Chiesa, which was ultimately a decision
Who's
loss.
harder to find, Bobby Fischer or Saparbek Safarov?
Saparbek Safarov, maybe. I'm talking Tarek Saffiedine.
Tarek Saffiedine, that's who I meant, goodness.
He's hanging out in Belgium. That's what he's doing. But when I look at it,
career.
For RDA, the point is, in the last 5 years, a lot of fights are 5-rounders. And were they winning 5-rounders? Not necessarily, but I look at fights against Kamaru Usman losing by decision, Leon Edwards losing by decision, and then Paul Felder, the split decision win. It's kind of crazy how those fights went on. I mean, with Usman, he was able to wrestle. With Leon Edwards, he was able to mix it up, but also use his wrestling to get the win there. For RDA, the only guy that he's beaten recently that's over 6 feet is the Neil Magny fight. You look at it for Moicano coming in around 5'11". He's going to have the reach. He's going to have the height. But the weird thing about Moicano doing that deep dive, as I mentioned, is he doesn't necessarily fight as a longer fighter in some of his fights. Even go back to his last fight against Alexander Hernandez. He doesn't necessarily pop a jab out there. He will utilize his leg kicks, but it's often one and then a reset. We wait one and then a reset. I know he throws 2 out in that Hernandez fight, but I look at Moicano, not a guy that fights with his length all that much. And you look at it in the fight against Hernandez, in that last minute and a half of the first round, and even before then, he's waiting for Hernandez to dart in, to utilize his counter striking, to throw that uppercut, and he loves to throw a nice uppercut, follow it up with a hook, really crack his opponents. And in the second round, he cracks Hernandez with a nice 3-punch combo. Hernandez shoots in for a lazy double because he's hurt. Moicano stuffs it, then he ends up in perfect opportunity to submit him there.
I think Moicano is a pretty good fighter at range. I disagree a little bit. What I think the difference is once guys get on the inside of the range, that's where he does struggle to deal with it. But when he is just in an open setting, like go back to the Calvin Kattar fight, go back to the Brian Ortega fight, he is throwing a lot of jabs, he is throwing a lot of leg kicks, and they are some of those water in the basement techniques that do add up over time. So I don't disagree with you. I do think that if RDA can get on the inside of his reach, he will have a lot of success. But when it is in the outside, I do think Moicano can have some success, especially if he's kick heavy. But that's going to be the interesting thing about this fight. Since these guys are at the opposite stances, I always go back to the RDA fight against Anthony Pettis. And Anthony Pettis is somewhat similar body type-wise to Renato Moicano. That's why I thought of this fight, or to parallel along this one. But with Moicano, he doesn't throw a lot of kicks offensively. He does rely a lot on his boxing defensively. Like you said, he likes that uppercut. He'll even time an elbow on the inside every now and then. I don't know how Moicano is going to deal with the left body kick of RDA, because RDA can use that. He landed that on Usman, and yes, Usman was able to take him down a couple times off that, but you get the idea. Like, that's one of his prime, like, top-tier techniques of, oh, when I think about Rafael dos Anjos, the 3 things I think of are a lead left hand, because he's really good at that. He doesn't always set it up with the jab. He throws a great southpaw kick to the body, and then I would say just his overall grappling package would kind of be the 3rd thing I think about. But for Moicano, maybe it hasn't been all that recently. You're right. Neil Magny would probably be the last guy frame-wise similar to Moicano who RDA has fought. But traditionally throughout his career, he beat the brakes off Cowboy Cerrone twice. Cowboy, similar build to Moicano. He has been able to beat some tall, rangy strikers just by being able to get on the inside of them. And that's what I keep on going back to, because for Moicano, we always talk about how good his striking is compared to how many knockouts he has. He's one of those weird fighters where the record does not tell the whole story at all. But if you just watch his last fight, it tells you what he does. Wow. He drops you on the feet, chokes you out, because he's an intelligent fighter. If he comes into this fight with RDA thinking that, though, I don't think he can submit RDA. And I've said people can't submit people on this channel before, but in my mind's eye, it's okay. On the map, Moicano might be able to go 50-50, but he's probably going to be on the bottom in a lot of these situations because RDA is the better wrestler. And on the feet, I don't think he can keep up with the volume of RDA unless he can hurt him early like he did come Swanson.
So the craziest part about this fight, and we're going to go nitty-gritty into this one, technique-wise. You look at Moicano, 80% takedown defense in his UFC career. The only guy to take him down is Zubaira Tukhugov. So I had to go back and watch that fight. First takedown by Tukhugov, I'm not even joking. It's this. He just pushes him. Moicano kind of falls down, almost accepting it. And then the rest of the round almost rides out with Tukhugov on top, but not accomplishing anything. And Moicano goes for a triangle at one point. He really does attempt from bottom. You go into the 3rd round of that fight. There's a spot where Moicano just kind of pulls guard, and then they both end up back on their feet. Then Tagir goes for a single leg into a double. Moicano is down, and then he pops right back up to his feet. Moicano is one of the fighters. Now, you're not going to see him on overall stat sheets at lightweight. You haven't really seen him much at lightweight in the UFC. But at featherweight, bottom time percentage and bottom time percentage in general, very, very low. And really, that 80% is a pretty feeble 80% takedown defense. And I should say, he has really good takedown defense. But if it goes to the mat, Moicano's specialty, and you said it, I mean, you look at the amount of knockouts Moicano has, there's none, but he sets things up with his hands to work his jiu-jitsu.
Shannon Sharp would approve of his boxing.
It really is the craziest thing that you can factor in. But when I went through everything, I mean, with Dos Anjos, you talk about, man, this guy's been in the cage forever. If you look at it, 8 most fights of all time in the UFC, he's got 30 of them. Second all-time behind Frankie Edgar at 7 hours, 8 minutes, and 11 seconds of cage time. For Dos Anjos, he's fought some of the best at welterweight and at lightweight, and a former champion to boot, already getting ready for a 5-round fight.
And Jeremy Stevens like 10 years ago.
And not much is true. And it was supposed to be a 5-rounder a few weeks ago against Fiziev. There were some visa issues on the Fiziev camp. Then they moved it to the co-main event this weekend. Obviously, Fiziev out of this fight. So for Dos Anjos, 5 rounds definitely favors him, especially in a spot like this. At 160 pounds, it favors Dos Anjos in this setting. Now, whether he won a 165, whether he won a 170 or 160, I mean, listen, Islam Makhachev punched those digits into the navigation system. Looked like he was going to Vegas. We don't get that fight. I would have liked that fight. But I enjoy a Moicano fight as well.
When Kawhi Leonard was a free agent after the Raptors won the title, there was like a 4-hour span where people thought it was a done deal. He was coming back. That's how I felt when Islam was going to fight RDA this weekend. It was like, okay, so they're fighting at 165. Not ideal for anybody, but we can't always have nice things, and this is probably the best case scenario for both guys. At least we are going to get RDA versus Makhachev. And of course, can't have nice things, but I do think this is going to be a good fight. Again, Renato Moicano would not have taken this fight if he didn't think he could win it, and he did fight not that long ago, so I know I said, oh, he might be ballooning in weight, but still, I do expect him to show up somewhat fight ready. It's just the cardio issues really do worry me, and I know it's not something he has traditionally worried about throughout his career, but you have to remember, the majority of his career was not spent at this weight class, and that's what I always worry about. When guys switch weight classes, I think of Luke Rockhold when he moved up to 205. He had amazing cardio at 185, but when he put that extra weight on, he struggled a little bit. He even said it was a little uncomfortable for me. I had to cut more weight than I expected, even just because, you know, I wasn't really used to my body there. With Moicano, I worry about lightweight and his cardio being one of those cases to where he hasn't found the Goldilocks zone yet because he's had 2 very quick fights. He's had 1 competitive fight, but again, the Hernandez fight was over quick by the time the second round came. So for Moicano, I think he needs to have a hard decision fight, maybe against somebody outside the rankings before we really know what his ceiling can be at this weight class, or at least that's what I personally like to see, because I don't know what he's going to do against RDA. I think this is an awful stylistic matchup for him.
And it's a weird one for Moicano. His last fight that went to decision was the Calvin Kattar fight back in 2018. So kind of crazy to look at that one. We look at the odds for this fight. Dos Anjos open to -200 favorite. He's a -185 as it stands for Moicano. Open to +170. He's a +150 or thereabouts. We have a look at the Tapology votes. A surprise to us as they might be to you. And out of them, I mean, it's 74% Dos Anjos, only 300 votes. But Matt, I can one-up it. I can really get into, as we say, the nitty-gritty. We go over to the community tab with Fight Night picks. 746 total votes. You guys show up more than the Tapology voters. 66% with Dos Anjos. We go into the comments section. Daniel Cooley saying, I think people would be more excited for this if Islam didn't tease everyone.
Probably.
Maybe me included. Luke LaRoche saying, this one is almost 50-50, both coming in with elite level experience. I think Moicano is going to get the dub. I wouldn't touch this on my bets, though. See what the odds are for the over 2.5 rounds or 3 rounds. Who else? Prince Vegeta's son, who's always in the chat 100%. On the weekend. Always there with the fight companions, as well as question mark kicks. I'd rather watch Habib in a steam room than this fight. So that one is a little tempting. But we look at all the comments, Matt. Seems a lot of Islam, Makhachev love. They'd rather see him in this fight. But a lot of people favoring Dos Anjos and a few with Moicano. But, Matt, when you're looking at this fight, you're making a pick. I know you kind of alluded to it earlier. I think full camp, honest to goodness, I would like Moicano in this fight.
I wouldn't. I'm going to be completely sincere. I I didn't know what the odds were. I didn't check them. Like, we knew this fight was going to happen. I just got to the studio, and then we recorded this. I didn't know what the odds were, but I assumed Moicano was going to be, like, a plus 280 almost. Like, I really did expect RDA to be, like, a 3-1 favorite, if not more. Because, again, RDA at his best, and I know he's not always at his best, but at his worst, he's fighting pressure wrestlers. Something Moicano is not. Like, if Renato Moicano isn't anything, it's a guy who just pressures forward and shoots for a lot of takedowns. He will move backwards, he does get out-volumed in some of his fights, and he hasn't always been susceptible to eating power shots. Like, I know Jose Aldo knocked him out. Okay, Jose Aldo's one of the best knockout power or punchers ever, and Fiziev knocked him out. He's a great striker too. But if Dos Anjos can start putting combinations together, and if he starts moving downhill, putting the leg kick together with the body hook, like, I don't think Moicano can survive a similar fight that Robbie Lawler survived. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. And I really do think we're going to get a similar version of RDA, because again, when he's not fighting guys who can take him down, he's normally the one leading the dance, going downhill, throwing his own combos. And for me, Moicano doesn't offer a lot of resistance to any of the strengths that RDA shows. Maybe Father Time will catch up to him. It's going to at some point, but he still looks, he might not be prime version of himself anymore, but if he was all NBA, he's still all-star now, and I think it's going to be enough to get it done against Moicano.
The last 5-rounder for Renato Moicano was against Korean Zombie in a fight where he ducked through the hook, caught him, and then dropped him, and he just spent odd amounts of time that we just didn't need. In that first minute of the fight where he was just hammering away, he had the back. It was a position where we never really see Moicano in that position defending off his back with the strikes. But when I do look at this, Moicano's one of those guys that when he gets kicked to the body, he's the type that can be a little reactionary, and once he gets hit, then he swipes it away. Like, there's another fighter on this card that we talk about if you go back through where they get kicked, and then after the fact, we're swiping the kick away. It's not necessarily one of those reactionary things that I do like to see. Love the defensive hips and the takedown defense from Moicano. And again, he is the type that when one fight against Zubair Tukhugov, who will throw volume, will mix in the takedowns. Dos Anjos does that.
If you compare Tukhugov to RDA, I'm going to lose my mind.
But obviously, it's at a much lower level. And we've seen Tukhugov have competitive fights against some of the better guys in the division. Obviously, a guy that I love a lot, Lerone Murphy. That was a fight that happened not that long ago. But when I do look at this fight, I do ever so slightly like Dos Anjos with the experience, with the fact that he was already training for a 5-round fight.
I was going to say, the fact he knew he was about to have a fist fight for half an hour.
And you're getting ready for a striker, and that's another thing that I go back to. Out of the guys that Moicano's fought in the UFC, out of the Southpaw fighters, I mean, you've had Fiziev that switches stances that he's fought. You also have Brian T. City Ortega. Those are the only two guys that he's fought with that Southpaw aspect to their game, depending on which stance they decide to fight out of. So I do like Dos Anjos in this fight, but I will say it is ever so slightly. Again, Moicano early in a fight, maybe he's able to catch him with some of the counters.
Didn't know he was going to fight this weekend.
That's it.
That's a pretty big point.
Maybe you can get the submission on him, but it all comes back
never
to
been submitted in his career.
It is a really, really tricky one. Looking at both of these guys' records, again, with Moicano, not typically the type of guy that ends up going that far. And for Dos Anjos, only
How long ago was that?
One submission loss on Dos Anjos.
That was the jaw injury against Clay Guida, so it doesn't even count.
It's been a very long time. So we got a big-time fight coming up in that co-main event slot. Obviously, a lot of you in the community tab siding with Dos Anjos, but we need to know down below in that comment section. Get it trending on the YouTubes. You let us know who you have in this fight. And it is a big-time fight card. You can catch us live, question mark kicks, 2 hours before the prelims. Who made weight? Who didn't? We'll give you that final look at the card. And for this weekend, UFC 272, the Fight Night Picks Companion. We're going to have fun. We're going to be hanging out here in the studio, talking about the fights as they go live for that main card. So as we always say with Fight Night Picks, let's get into it.